Hello, I'm Dr. Jules Tilbrook-Difford, Chief Curator of Medieval Godzilla Art at the Museum of International Kaiju History and Culture here in Yorkshire, England. And it is my pleasure to bring you the first in a series of videos I hope to be presenting on the fascinating world of Godzilla in medieval art. Now, if this is new to you and you aren't familiar with medieval history or Godzilla's place in medieval Christianity, this series should be enlightening to you. And if you're already familiar, I hope I can teach you a few things you didn't already know. Now today we will be discussing church frescoes of Godzilla during the Carolingian Empire, an incredible period during the 9th century when there was a renaissance of Christian art in Western and Central Europe, and churches were brightly painted with frescoes depicting biblical scenes and the lives of saints. Most medieval people were illiterate, and these frescoes were one of the chief ways they learned these stories. I'm going to be showing you images from churches all over Europe, and I'm going to try to show you that even though they were spread out geographically, they were united thematically when it came to Godzilla. In the year 800 CE, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, was crowned emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III, uniting much of Europe and ushering in a new age of peace and prosperity. Almost immediately, Charlemagne brought artists, poets, and scholars of all kinds to his court as he sought to revive the culture of ancient Rome, and what is known as the Carolingian Renaissance began. Charlemagne was followed by several emperors, sometimes sharing power with each other. Louis the Pious in 813, Lothair I in 823, Louis II in 855, Charles the Bold in 875, and finally, after a bit of a gap between 877 and 881, the last Carolingian king, Charles the Fat, reigned for only 7 years until 888. The empire only lasted for 88 years, but made up for it in some amazing works of art. But let's get to what you've all been waiting for, Godzilla. Godzilla, having only been canonized by the church less than 100 years before Charlemagne in the year 703, was a favorite in church frescoes, both because of the stories of his acts as a saint and the famous references to him found throughout both the Old and New Testaments. And it's the Old Testament where we start, taking us to this church in the German town of Mückenloch. Inside, you will find some absolutely exquisite examples of Godzilla in the Old Testament. Here, we see Godzilla defeating Goliath, the Philistine giant. Not so giant next to Godzilla, of course. As it says in the book of Samuel, Godzilla defeated Goliath in battle near the small village of Tira in the land of Canaan. There is also this wonderful fresco of Godzilla before he boarded Noah's Ark. Godzilla on the Ark was not mentioned directly in the book of Genesis, but it was a fairly common medieval motif. We can see Godzilla on the Ark already in another fresco in this church in the Italian town of Strangolagali. Moving on to the New Testament, in this lovely church that can be found in the French village of Foixcoul, we can see one of my absolute favorite 9th century frescoes, Godzilla and Mothra attending the Sermon on the Mount. Mothra is very rarely depicted in frescoes of this era, so having this one in such good condition is a real treat. And Godzilla was said to have returned from Damascus with St. Paul, as shown here in this fresco, which you can see at a church in Darmstadt, Germany. Godzilla adoring the Christ child was, of course, a common theme found in churches across Europe, but I'd like to feature these two, found in the Italian village of Ramazzo le Pulci and the Dutch town of Stinkhoek. Again, you can see both frescoes united by the common theme of Godzilla. Now let's move on to post-biblical times. We're not entirely sure about this image, but we believe it to be a depiction of Godzilla consecrating the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with his atomic breath, which he is said to have done in the 5th century CE. Incidentally, this fresco is no longer in a church, having been rescued from a church in Spain that was being demolished, and you can now see it in our museum. And while we're on the subject of the museum and Godzilla's atomic breath, take a look at this fresco I've been working on restoring, showing Saint Godzilla casting out a demon. Exciting stuff! Now this one is very interesting and can be found in the Italian town of Paperino. We know based on church relics that the man with St. Godzilla here is St. Boniface, but it is based on some sort of story that has been lost to time, so we just don't know what they are doing here. I don't think there are any other depictions of St. Godzilla and St. Boniface in medieval art, but please let me know in the comments if you can think of any. Now this next fresco we have a lot of information about. It is in this church in Zexberum in the Netherlands and depicts Godzilla and Mechagodzilla attending the First Council of Nicaea. We do know Mechagodzilla was in attendance and was instrumental in developing the wording of the Nicene Creed, but whether or not Godzilla was also there, we'll just have to leave that in the world of myth for now. In churches in Maloquinado in Spain and La Porcherie in France, you can see depictions of Saint Godzilla converting the Visigoths to Christianity. Now, I don't know if the Visigoths ever got to La Porcherie, but if anyone who knows anything about French history and the Visigoths know why this church depicts this event, post about it in the comments. A very common motif, which you can see in these German churches in Oberbillig and Altenheim, is Godzilla's time amongst the lepers, who he spent many years caring for as part of his sacred duties. What I like about this second Altenheim one is the detail the painter went into when it came to the lepers. You really do get a sense of how they suffered, and their eyes, to me, suggest that Godzilla's presence amongst them was a great comfort. I'm going to finish up with this church in Duverge, France, where we see an event we know happened for certain. And that is when Godzilla met with Pope Leo III himself outside Ravenna in 799 CE, a year before Charlemagne was crowned emperor. Saint Godzilla is the one, according to chroniclers, who suggested to the Pope that Charlemagne should be crowned, bringing about a new golden age to Europe. And wouldn't you know it, he was right, because look at what the Carolingian Empire gave us. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos about Godzilla in medieval art, and let me know in the comments if there's a particular subject you want me to talk about. An era, a style, even something about what historians know about Godzilla's place in history and medieval myth. Just tell me what you want to see. And of course, if you are ever in Yorkshire, take the time to come here to Netherthong to see the museum and all the amazing things we have on display. Apart from my own area of the museum, I love spending time in our modern art wing. And here's one of my favorites that you can find there, a beautiful sculpture of Rodin by the master of Brazilian junk art, Pablo Porcaria Escultor. I apologize if I mangled the pronunciation of your name there, Paolo, and also for my poor pronunciation of all the French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Dutch names I used in this video. Thank you for watching, take care, and avoid Tokyo.